I got to meet a legendary cinematographer years back named Gordon Willis.
Oh, yeah.
Gordon shot The Godfather and The Godfather, and he did the great black and white Woody Allen movies. Gordon Willis was a serious talent.
Yeah, I mean, like truly, truly a cinematic genius.
Gordon was all that. And I got to meet him toward the end of his life. And he made an observation that I will never forget. And he said, people think that this is so glamorous. He said, a day on a movie set is like digging coal.
I am super excited to have my dear friend Gerry Quist joining me today. He is an extraordinary man and makeup artist here in Hollywood and has been a part of this industry for over 40 years. And I don't even think Gerry has, I think he's in his 50s, his late 50s, and he has traveled the world many times over and has been personal to many people and has worked on some of the biggest projects. And what I love about Gerry is we always want to sit down and have a cup of coffee. So I invited him here today because I just think he's an incredible, fun person who has a lot to say and offer and just share around the campfire. So listen in, join me. I cannot wait for you to hear this conversation between me and my dear friend, Gerry Quist, award-winning makeup artist. Hold your seat. So I as we were just saying, you were saying how you, upon seeing yourself in the camera, how you referenced to your father, and I said your father must have been very dapper, and you were very well influenced because you've always showing up, which I've always appreciated about you, Gerry, as an individual and a peer in the industry, as a man, how you carry yourself. Lots of things for me to talk about with you. First off, I want to say thank you. And thank you for accepting my invitation as being a guest here on my podcast. I look forward to all the things we're going to talk about.
My pleasure. I couldn't say no to you.
Well, we're so way overdue for that cup of coffee. I thought, well, let's make this the initial cup of coffee. Do you have a cup of coffee with you by chance?
You know, I actually do.
Well, cheers. I made sure to represent, to be true to the word and the experience.
I have a bottle of Crystal Geyser standing by.
You must have all options if possible.
Absolutely.
And we're fortunate, needless to say. And the reason why I wanted to have you here and join me around the campfire, as I like to say, sure, is because I think of you, Gerry, as a human being who's always had this very warm, inviting presence. You've always been the person who feels very approachable. And yet you've been in this industry in Hollywood as a professional makeup artist for, I believe, over 40 years. And yeah, right, and representing a lot of generations of artists that I want to get into, who has seen a lot of things. And as a man who is probably closer in his retiring stage of this aspect of his life, not in life in general, you know, would have a lot, I would imagine, to say about lots of things. So what I like to share here is that there's nothing that we don't talk about, which is why it's called Camp Fifi Uncensored. Sure. So it's not about making you uncomfortable. It's about allowing you to just be your truth. And that's what I love around, you know, people joining me, is that we get to be ourselves. We get to be our truth. We don't have to, this is not a put on. This is like Felicia and Gerry truly around the campfire. So I wanted to share with the audience, how long have you officially been a professional makeup artist?
Well, being paid to do it. I'll interpret that as being, how long have I actually been getting money to put
Yeah.
makeup actors? My first professional job was when I was 17.
Okay.
Prior to that, I had been working at a company in North Hollywood called Don Post Studios, and they made Halloween masks, but that didn't really qualify as being a makeup artist. My first job as a makeup artist I got when I was 17 on a crazy little non-union, very low budget movie that was a ripoff of the movie Alien.
Oh,
And,
wow.
and I was 17 years old and was going in and putting monster makeup on people. It was cool.
So fun. So I want to go back from that point. So you were born and raised in the Los Angeles area, right? It was Burbank, Glendale. Where were you born?
Glendale, California. Yeah,
So you
mom and dad have been here since the 50s. I was born here in 1965 and never left.
And where did your parents originally come from before they started in California?
They were from Wisconsin and Illinois. My dad was from Illinois and my mom was from Wisconsin.
Honestly, Gerry, have we ever discussed this?
No.
Oh my God, this gives me exactly the reason why you and I have always resonated with each other. Because I've always called myself a cheesehead flatlander. I am as much Illinois and Wisconsin. And there is something to be said. Even my dear friends like yourself, who are second generation Midwesterners, have this quality, this work ethic, this genuine personality, this engagement. There's just a jeu de vivre that there's something different of that quality. No disrespect to any other. So that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. And it certainly isn't disrespectful to anybody. There are traits. America is a huge, huge country. And I think you can really see differences. You can see general differences in people if they come, say, the West Coast or the Midwest or the East Coast. There are traits. I agree with you.
Yeah, there's traits, and I don't know. It could be a combination of cultures that settled. It could be a combination of just because let's this is what I always say, and it really resonated with me after I moved to California. But any person I met from the whole Midwest, like that could be technically in my mind from Ohio to Oklahoma kind of thing, and then go south to Tennessee and up to the Dakota. I mean, there's just like that general vicinity. We could all be educated differently, have different socioeconomics, have different religions and beliefs and practices. But there's this underbelly, underlying trait that we all can speak similar languages in the sense of understanding how we go through life. And I love that. So that really just, wow. So going back to when you were a little boy here, growing up in Glendale, did you have a dream to get into the film industry? Like, who were you as a little boy? What was little Gerry thinking, and what was little Gerry doing that created Gerry Quist's future?
Little Gerry.
Little Gerry.
I think that working in the movie industry was something on my radar from the time I was very, very young. Before, I'm going to say, hell, maybe even prior to 5 or 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
The reason for that is because, well, there wasn't a hell of a lot to do. My mom and dad both worked, and I was forever in the care of, one of my aunts or somebody living locally. And the thing to do was to watch TV, and TV was full of old movies, and I loved them, and I really liked the scary ones. I don't remember not being intrigued by that. I didn't know it was called the movie industry, certainly, and nobody in my family had any sort of an artistic leaning or any kind of a bent toward the entertainment industry. But I think what really started it for me was one of my uncles, and I was just old enough to understand what he was saying. I was watching one of the classic monster movies, one of the really classic Universal movies, for the 50th time.
Yeah.
One of my uncles explained to me that all those movies came from a place called Universal Studios, which was about 5 miles from where we lived at the time.
Wow.
Which it still is, from my front door in Glendale, I could be to Universal Studios in fewer than 10 miles, certainly, probably 7 or 8 miles. Back then it was we lived even closer. And he told me that there was this place called Universal Studios, and they made all those movies, and that people called makeup artists put all that together. That the actors didn't do that themselves, and they weren't, they didn't necessarily look like a werewolf or whatever. Anyway, it really lit a fire in my mind that that's a job. I understood the concept of people having a job. My dad was a barber. My mother was a clerk in a factory. All my aunts and uncles worked. They all did stuff. So I understood that. And that was my first realization that, wow, somebody actually does that. They go
and your dad was a barber. Did you ever go hang out at the barber shop with him?
Every day.
Every day you were at the barber shop. Love that so much, because like you, my grandmother was a hairdresser. Not like, more worked out of her home. By the time I was born, she'd really stopped that. But growing up in the fashion industry, which I think that I did, I grew up in all those stores every day, and grew up around in a salon environment every week. So like your father and your mother also, being that they worked, you understood work ethic. Being a kid of the 60s, you're being raised around television that was really starting to go into a whole new hemisphere of exposure, because we're now post the 50s. We're now going to get introduced to color. You have all this content that's been created in the 50s and the 40s and going back to, the Chaplins and what have you. But if you were paying attention and seeing in front of that box, you were getting exposed to a lot of content. And a lot of kids our age, if they were latchkey kids, even if they were being cared by other people, but you were a latchkey kid for all intents and purposes, which I think was a newer terminology in the 60s, when both parents were going to work. Because I think it was like wartime and then 60s. Not that women didn't work in the 50s, but I think there was a window of the industrial area that people, women stayed more at home, the traditional Camelot kind of. But once women went back to work and it was a 2 household, like out the door, latchkey kids like ourselves were created.
Yeah, that's why I spent so much time at my dad's barber shop. When I was a kid in elementary school, there was this window of time every day where mom didn't get home until, let's say, 5 o'clock or something in the evening, or 4, whatever it was. School let out, and there was this about 2-hour window where I would have been home alone, and they didn't want. They had the wisdom and walk from school every afternoon to my dad's barber shop, and I would hang out there for an hour and a half until my mother got off work, and then she'd pick me up and take me home. But I was exposed to the workings of a business, specifically in grooming, from the time I was really, really young, like, second grade, first grade, really young.
Gerry, makes absolute sense with how you show up presenting yourself.
Sure.
Every day. Every day. It's foundational. It's cellular. It's what you know. It's who you are. It's how you carry forth your legacy. It's all those things wrapped up in one big bow. And also not only the fact that you were learning business, getting to be with your father, witnessing your parents both being, in the field of having careers, you also got to be around a lot of adults or a variety of people in the barbershop.
Oh,
So I
yeah.
have to imagine that was a great influence also on how you learned, how you listened, how you carried yourself, what you took from that. Who were your favorite people you saw? Not favorites, but people that inspired you. Were there people that came into your father's barbershop that you really kind of held yourself differently or wanted to lean in more to ever that you can think of? Was there a person who carried themselves from a city perspective or an affluence that you might have been drawn to?
I think that most of all, first and foremost, I was impressed with my dad.
Yeah.
In that he was dealing with this wide clientele. His shop was in a pretty nice area of Glendale, and his clientele were certainly an upper class kind of a gentleman. These guys were all retired bankers and business people of some sort or another. And a lot of my father's social skill was being able to deal with this wide variety of people with their demands. Most of them rather privileged, compared to where dad came from and what he was able to generate as a barber. The thing that really impressed me, especially looking back on it, was his ability to handle people that were on, in the winter of their lives, who were physically impaired and mentally impaired. Old age is no fun. And I remember watching my dad deal with these guys with such patience and such. And at the time, it was as a kid watching some of this, it was kind of scary because you don't understand.
Right.
As time went by, and I really got to start to comprehend what he was dealing with and how he was dealing with it. It was lovely, and that made a big impression on me.
And there's a lot to be said for that, Gerry, especially as we do mature in life and we both have seen our parents pass and go through, these transitions, whether we've seen friends pass, we've seen family pass. Dignity, respect, grace, how you treat others is set at a very young age and does carry into all aspects of your life. And it makes perfect sense. And we've never had this conversation, as many fun dribbles of conversations we get to have together. And we're always like, come on, do we have to work? We just want to talk. And you and I are workers. But my point is that it makes total sense. Even more so to me today, hearing these backstories, these, of your history, why you became who you became, more than I ever knew before, which I really love and appreciate. And how long did your father own his barbershop?
He was, the shop that I'm talking about specifically, he was there for, my entire, from the time I was probably in kindergarten past the time that I graduated from high school.
Wow.
I think altogether he was in that same shop for more than 30 years.
Fantastic.
And he cut hair for forever. He got to a point where he couldn't, as a barber, as a hairstylist, you're working on that level a lot with your shoulders up and your hands up. Got to a point where he just couldn't keep his shoulders up all day. And that finally walked away from it. But he was there forever. he had a clientele. He had guys that would show up twice a week.
Yeah.
And a lot of what he was doing back in those days was shaving guys.
Yeah.
Had a clientele that they were accustomed to that happening at a barbershop, and especially a lot of these guys got older, shaving themselves safely and accurately. It wasn't possible anymore, so they'd go to my dad a couple of times a week.
Yeah, not with a straight edge.
Yeah,
not with a straight edge and that handle, and try to, or if they dropped it into the cartridge. No, it was a lot. Yeah, no question. And lifestyle, many of those men probably had a good drink or two and had a cigarette or two, and God knows what else over time. Just
always full of smoke.
Yeah.
Very smoky.
No doubt. Cigarette, cigar, or a pipe. One of the three. That was the generation that we were raised around.
Oh, absolutely. I cut them a lot of slack. I don't think they knew what they were doing to themselves.
No. It was what you did.
I have a great memory about my dad, since we're talking about this, that I should share with you. He, like I said, a lot of his clientele were older people, a lot of them. And it was not unusual for, people would die. I don't think he ever had anybody die in the chair, but this is part of the cycle of life. And one day we were out doing something. I was with him, and he was going to go to Forest Lawn over here in Glendale, the cemetery, and go to the visitation of one of his clients who had died. And Dad wanted to go and sign the book. And I was with him at the time, and he said, well, come with me. I must have been about 9 years old. And I had never seen a dead person. And we went to Forest Lawn, and we went into I think they call it the slumber room. Like,
where they're resting.
And we went in there, and I knew this fella that had died. I knew. And there he was. And we walked up and had a look at him and signed the guest book. And that was a key moment in my life. And it started this whole conversation about life and death.
Oh, had it?
With my dad. And
so that was your first awareness of death, was in this experience at that funeral.
Yeah, that was my first up close and in-person experience. Very telling moment of realization that this doesn't go on forever.
I
did now, and one of these days I'm going to turn into my father, and one of these days I'm going to be the guy in the coffin. And that connection was made. And we had an epic conversation about it that I'll never forget. And the upshot of it was I was never afraid of dying.
Amazing.
Yeah. Very grateful for that.
So your father was just an absolutely huge influence on who you became, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Although my mother was the voice of sanity. my dad was a great guy. I mean, he genuinely was, and he was a committed parent. He wanted to be a parent. He got married and had kids because that's something he really wanted to do with his life. But whereas my father was the one saying, you know what, go be a makeup artist, go try to work in the, that's what you want to do. My mother was up to the side saying, no, go to college. Get an education, get that thing to fall back on.
Yeah.
She wasn't wrong, but
she wasn't wrong. And it's an interesting, and where did you end up getting your education?
I went to Hoover High here in Glendale, and during high school, I was working on movies.
Oh, yeah.
During summer break and after school, I was working on stuff already. And after I graduated from high school, I went to Glendale Community College.
Mm-hmm.
Idea was that I would get all the credentials and everything that you need to be an English teacher. And then I was going to pursue a career in the movies. And during that time, I think I was at Glendale College for about 3 weeks, very short time. And I was offered a job on a crazy little non-union horror movie. And it was a hard offer. It was like, no kidding. And my dad told me in no uncertain terms that I was going to take the job on the movie, that I was going to pursue that and ride that out until the movie was over, or I was going to move out of the house.
Wow, fascinating how those two things were presented.
And he wasn't.
You can make money and live here, maybe free, or
right.
Go get the education and go get yourself your own place.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he wasn't kidding. He had a really firm grasp on, lives. I think if you look at any of our lives, there's key moments where you say yes or no. And my dad was very, very in touch with that. Whereas my mom was very conservative, very safe, very, let's
and
not.
Possibly would miss opportunities because of her conservatism, or pardon?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. But again, what I'd have to say about both of them is that they didn't have, neither of them came from anything as unpredictable and as dynamic as being a makeup artist in the movies or having anything to do with entertainment. But my dad saw the potential, and he knew that my interest in it was very intense. And
I know he clearly believed in you, and he saw how you showed up just as a human being, and how I would imagine how he observed your engagement and your passion and your observation and your curiosity and how you carried yourself and how you developed. I don't think he ever would have given you that, what I would call that rich dad, poor dad opportunity, which was really, really so fortunate. And so fortunate, truthfully, Gerry, to be down the street from the community that really at the time that you came in was, even though there was Cinecittà, Rome, and Pinewood in London, and things all over the world, as we both know, Hollywood was Hollywood, still is technically Hollywood, but it's a different kind of experience today, I think, than it was then, where before things really started to disperse through lots of different reasons. We'll get into that later. So to look at this little boy getting, this foundational background, and watching and looking at this box where you got to see all these old movies and then get these opportunities, clearly you were inspired by all of these things. Your father, your mother, the exposure to television, your uncle. I mean, your uncle was a great messenger.
Yeah.
To come through and just be like, and you listened, you heard him. It was like you said, it lit you up. So it was like the path, it was like the vision board unfolding before your eyes, whether you have like your walls wallpapered with, monster movie posters, or, whatever it was. Did you do anything like that? Did you ever like hang up things that like you were?
Oh, sure.
What did your walls look like?
Absolutely. I had movie posters. I loved movie posters. I still do. The movie posters I had were things from the 1970s for the most part. And strangely enough, the movie posters I remember having up on the wall I don't know if I own any of that stuff anymore or not. But I remember having a poster from The Deer Hunter. You remember The Deer Hunter, the old Robert De Niro?
Of course.
Poster from The Deer Hunter. I had
so great.
just such a colorful, beautiful poster.
Wow. Because that was really done artfully. It wasn't digital. It was hand done. It was really executed. Screen print, like the whole spiel.
Yeah. I
Real classic.
That somewhere or another, for some reason, I had the poster from Midnight Cowboy.
Oh my God.
I think I had read in a magazine somewhere, I had discovered who Dick Smith was, and Midnight Cowboy was what Dick had worked on it as a designer. And I got to see Midnight Cowboy on late night TV. I'm sure heavily edited, although, today it's tame. And I really liked the movie. And I remember having a poster for Midnight Cowboy up on the wall. I had all sorts of stuff. I got to a point where I had to rotate things because I had much. And strangely enough, none of that material I had was from monster movies in particular.
No. Those were actually from great storytelling pieces. Classic, original, rich, character-driven, really dialogue-driven, no explosions, it was about people talking with each other and connecting, and how did they play off of each other, and how did that drive the story. That to me is like the epitome of awesome filmmaking and storytelling.
I remember I had the poster from Apocalypse Now. That was a really good one. And my favorite poster, I haven't thought about this in the longest time. I had a poster from a movie called Heaven's Gate that Mike Pino had done. He's the same guy that did The Deer Hunter.
Yeah.
And the poster from Heaven's Gate was so beautiful. And so it was like a silhouette of Christopher Walken and not Christopher Walken, Chris Christopherson in his cowboy garb, silhouette of him in that wonderful costume in a smoky room with a gorgeous poster. I remember that having place of prominence in my room.
Well, I mean, you and I were raised in an era between the 60s and the 70s where storytelling and opportunity and independent films and the kind of people that were coming up in the industry and the kind of people, this was still when studios were pre-corporate, pre-international corporate, still ma and pa, so to speak, owned. So there was more independent kind of thinking allowed for. There wasn't like, there was one director and there was pretty much one producer and there was one writer. Not to say that things didn't go through hands and things didn't get cleaned up and there were multiples of all those things, but not like how it became in the 80s and how things started to shift through corporate, through different union strikes, through different, just how things shifted. So the 70s really did have that really incredible music and visually filmmaking was just like, bam, like we were raised in such a rich storytelling time, however that story was told. And and it is interesting that, like you said, to not even have the monster posters, these were like really dynamic, like historical pieces that if you know your history of film, you would of course know those titles from that era.
Oh yeah.
And it's really funny because you've won 5 Emmys, is that correct?
I have 5 Emmys.
And you're part of the Academy, correct?
Yeah.
And how long have you been a part of the Academy?
2009.
So 2009. So let's talk about that a little bit, because what people don't understand about the Academy is how you get welcomed into the Academy as a professional in your category. So preface this with, ironically, it was around the time that you were getting in. I must have asked the question probably within that 2-year framework. I was on a series. The artist's name shall be left out. I adore, but shall be left out. And I said to this person who I work with every day, so how do you get into the academy?
Yeah.
And they proceeded to turn to me and say, well, you're never going to get into the academy. So what does it matter?
Oh.
Swear to God. Swear to God. Swear to God. And this person is very supposedly well liked and known and all the things, and came through all the channels that any major would associate in a contemporary day. And this is not being negative. This is about how you have to pull yourself up and keep going. This is just the point. This is the positive. Pardon?
That people can be so mean.
Well, that is a true statement. And this industry is riddled, sadly, with that. And how you endure and pursue and persist and succeed is really like, I don't know about you, but, and this is not getting off topic, but however many people could you and I both talk about who would approach you and say, how do you get into business? I want to get into business, or I want you to talk to my kid or whatever. Happy, no worries, happy to. But are they ready, willing, and able to go through all of the things that you can't even begin to express for years on end with no guarantees, because it's one big gambling show. It's a gamble for any of us. And who we come across is a gamble, because there are no guarantees who we're going to be aligned with. You can show up being the most well-groomed, the most knowledgeable, the most efficient, the most work ethic, the most innovative, the most reliable, the pitch hitter of all pitch hitters. And you can be surrounded by people who don't want you to succeed.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And it's extremely competitive. And I think that sometimes the competition can bring out the dark side of people. And as secure as they may appear to be, they're suffering. They're suffering with some real anxiety, some real neurosis, and it can get ugly. And someone telling you or anybody, well, you'll never get into the academy, that's an example of someone that's hurt. There's an old expression: hurt people hurt people.
Hurt people hurt people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So let's get back to you about 2009 and what led up to you getting asked and invited in to get an opportunity to be a part of this, what is considered a very special class of people.
Sure. Yeah, I can tell you that pretty quickly. I think that as I grew up here in Glendale. I mean, you could walk from my home. I'm in Glendale, but you could walk into Burbank in less than 2 minutes. I'm very close to the border. My point being, I grew up very central to where movies and TV were being made, for decades and decades. And the point being that was, in a way, it was the home industry.
Mm-hmm.
I was very aware of the movie industry from a young age, and I loved the Academy Awards. I thought the Oscars were just, I looked forward to it every year and watched it religiously and followed it. And I would go to the theater. I have an older brother, bless him, who would take me to see movies. He had a car, and we would go out and see movies and talk about movies. And I was very, very involved with it. And I was aware of the Motion Picture Academy, and I thought it was just, the whole thing was really cool. And as I got older and started working and became more, just of our local industry, the movie academy was a big part of that. And it was something I always wanted to be a part of. From the time I was a very, very young person, I was aware of it and I wanted to participate in it. And when Rick Baker won the first Oscar for me back in, I think it was 1981, 81, 80, somewhere very early 1980s. And I watched that. I watched that happen on TV. Dorothy Chandler Pavilion is where they used to the Oscars when I was that age, watching this stuff. And it was just something that I had to be a part of. There was no two ways around it. So that I was always aware of the Motion Picture Academy and what I thought their mission was. And it took me from the time I got into the movie, into the union, into local.
Which was what year? I didn't mean to interrupt. What year were you?
January 22nd, 1987. And it was so important to me. I remember it very well.
Yes.
1987. So when I got into the Motion Picture Union and started working with, people that were much more established professionally than I was, and started hearing about the Motion Picture Academy and how they were trying to establish a branch specifically for makeup and hairstyling, that was really exciting to me. From 1987, when I got into the union and started, working in what most people consider the big league of entertainment, it took me 23 years to get a resume that would qualify me to join the Motion Picture Academy. You had to have a lot going on. You had to have something like 5 supervisory credits as a supervising makeup artist, makeup department head on at least 5 big movies. Movies that people had heard of.
Yes.
And you had that, and you had to have accrued those titles in a period of something like 6 years. You had to submit your resume as a whole, just like the entire career, whether you were the department head or not, just so they could get of what type of shows you were doing. It was a big thing. It was a very big thing, and it took me, like I say, 23 years to get that resume, and I was terrified of, sensitive little soul that I am, the idea of jumping through the hoops and submitting all the paperwork and being told, no, you're not good enough. Oh God, I couldn't stand it. So I wanted to be sure that I had a strong resume. And the process in those days, and I think this still holds true, you had to have 2 people within the branch, established people that were already a member of the branch that you were interested in my case, makeup and hair. And you had to be sponsored in, and they had to write letters of recommendation for you. And then there was this big meeting that would happen with the executive committee of the Academy, and they'd look at all the applicants. And back in those days, it's not that long ago, it's only 2009, but they were only letting in our branch, which is one of the smaller branches in the Academy, they were only letting in like anywhere between 1 and 4 people a year.
Yeah.
And getting applicants from all over the world.
I'm sure.
The year I got in, I think I was one of 3 or 4 in our branch that got in. And in those days, the entire Academy would let in, maybe 120 people a year. And that's all 15 branches. So it was a very different deal. And when I submitted and I got through the first time, I was really, really happy about that. And part of the fun thing I've enjoyed about being an Academy member was learning very quickly that there's a heck of a lot more to the Academy than the Academy Awards show. That's our world identity. People watch the Oscars, and it's a big spectacle, and it's a big old thing, and by design. The Academy is also involved. They're doing a lot in the way of education and providing opportunities for people that are interested in, let's say, script writing or whatever. they have different programs that are going on to encourage young people, and it's pretty great. It's an interesting group. I was at a screening last night of an obscure. Well, people would throw rocks at me for saying this. I had never heard of the movie. There's a movie out of Japan called Harakiri. Fantastic movie.
Oh yeah.
That they were showing at the Academy last night, and I went to go see it just out of curiosity. And the Academy does that kind of stuff. They make it possible for people to see these things, and it's like, oh wow.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful organization, and they do a lot in terms of education. It's pretty
well. I think first off, I think it's great that you're a part of the Academy, because I think you're a great representation of what is possible.
Sure.
And that you carry a torch that is honorable. When somebody gets engaged with you, there's a reason why you have earned it for your resume, that you have carried, for the people that you have worked with, for the shows that you have led. And I'm curious because, the Oscars, of course, depending upon when this airs, Oscars have definitely gone through or the Academy has gone through lots of growing, good, bad, or otherwise, hopefully for the better, because of people benefiting, people getting exposed to storytelling, people getting exposed to lots of different ways, from engineering to being an artist to being able to actually be an applicable artist in a realm that actually you can have this foundational business-like approach, even if you don't think of it as you're going into business for yourself or into business with many others as collaborators. And structurally, if you're fortunate enough to get into this community of artisans where, you can have potentially a pension and potentially medical insurance and potentially, not because it's handed to you, you have to keep earning it.
Sure.
I think those are things that, when somebody says to you, oh, you're in such a glamorous business, what is your response to that?
I try to be very gentle and very kind because they just don't know. And I don't like to, the reality of what we do versus the public perception of what we do is so different. And people, heck, even people in my own family that by this time ought to know better. Sometimes they talk to me in those terms. Like there's really nothing glamorous about it. I got to meet a legendary cinematographer years back named Gordon Willis.
Oh yeah.
Gordon shot The Godfather and The Godfather, and he did the great black and white Woody Allen movies. Gordon Willis was a serious talent.
Yeah, I mean, truly, truly a cinematic genius.
Gordon was all that, and I got to meet him toward the end of his life, and he made an observation that I will never forget. And he said, "People think that this is so glamorous." He said, "A day on a movie set is like digging coal," and it really is.
It really is.
It's arduous.
It really is.
It's arduous. And it's tiring and it's tedious and at its worst it can be really awful. And anyway, Gordon gave me that little gift, and I think about and I use it now in describing what we do. It's like digging coal. So that's what I tell people.
I love how authentic that statement is. It's genius,
Gordon was an authentic guy.
Well, and speaking of authentic, and speaking of digging coal, equating it to Hollywood, it's interesting because I think the ability to be authentic in our business depends upon, how and when you align with people and who they are. And the truth is most of the time, we have no idea who we're aligning with and doing business with. I don't care if it's the person in your chair or the person you're standing side by side with, or the person who's, on any part of the crew or in any way, shape, or form. And yet you have to build this immediate trust or respect. And it's not because it doesn't have to be earned, because we know it does, but there you are, and you have to make it happen, the magic happen. And I don't mean magic in a fantastical, delusional way. I just mean because you are hired to deliver and create, as I say, recreate the perfect wheel every moment with these people by doing this dance of what you bring in and what they bring in and combine, make this thing happen. And then when it comes to being authentic, as in, making a statement, a day on a movie is like digging coal. Most people, now here's the interesting thing. Gordon Willis could say it because Gordon Willis was Gordon Willis and was a man and was respected. And what were they going to say? He was still going to deliver stunning imagery. So they weren't going to say, yeah, you know what, Gordon, I've had enough of your bullshit, because, that doesn't work for me. But a lot of other people, given the same opportunity to speak that truth, would not be given, like, they'd be like, look, the door's over there, and thanks for your, putting in your 8 hours, and that 6 months I guaranteed you probably at this moment is no longer, because other people can't handle the truth. I mean, that line of Jack Nicholson's, it's like, it's so God, honestly, people can't handle the truth.
Very true.
And it's not about like, that has to be a mean statement, because it's not. It's an authentic statement.
It's reality,
It's reality. And one of the many things that I've liked about why you and I have always connected, Gerry, is because I've always felt, even if we only have fleeting moments while we're in the midst of what we're doing, and we've done some pretty intense things together, in our short time, right?
Sure.
But there's a respect and an understanding that, you're going to be authentic with me and I'm going to be authentic with you. And if we can't be, then we're going to say to one another, hey, not now, later. Or like, I just always sense that from you, I will never get bullshit. I will never get, treated poorly. I will never get an dishonest, inauthentic word or conversation from you. Whereas I don't, I love our peers, and there's, God knows, rivers and oceans of talent, but I can't say that about everybody. And that, I think, has been some of the most interesting parts of our journey, is being so passionate about what you do, being so passionate, being this, you were a little boy, I was a little girl. I knew that collectively I wanted to be an artist. I knew I didn't want to be a starving artist. I liked making money. I liked making money since I was a very little girl. I too was around those business people. So I knew you went to work. I knew you created things that, made things happen so you could have nice homes, nice cars, and travel and do all the things you wanted to do and be a leader and go out into the world and make your mark. I knew all that. I didn't know how it was going to happen. I knew that there were a lot of things I had to wrap up into one and make happen. With that said, how do you, what do you say to people with regards to dealing with humanity in our industry, and knowing that we have lots of different characters, not the ones we create, but the ones we stand next to, that how do you, it's almost like, it's like a war game.
Yeah.
I don't mean that. I don't mean that negatively. I mean that like, okay, look at the board, and how are you going to get from this part of this geography to that geography successfully winning, and maybe even taking home a statue. Not that that's an imperative thing, but my point is, because you're setting a high standard, as you always, I would imagine. I certainly choose to show up 1,000%. I think you choose to show up 1,000%, and then you come up against these individuals who don't like your 1,000%.
Oh, sure, yeah. and that's there's an absolute reality to that. We can't be all things to all people, and one of the things I had to learn early on was that not everybody's going to like you or appreciate what you're bringing to the table or trying to bring to the table. They're just not going to connect with you. And it could be any one of dozens and dozens of reasons. And I think that acceptance has a lot to do with that, and just the knowledge and the ability to deal with that truth, that not all of us are made for every individual or every job opportunity or every situation. There's a reason when you look at people that just they just appear to be hitting it out of the park one time after another, and they're never out of work, and they're always lining up the next big thing, and they're always doing. There's a reason for that. I don't think it's a mistake. And a lot of it is the luck of the draw. It really is. I think that as people coming into a creative field that potentially can pay very well, there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of people looking for those opportunities. And sometimes it comes down to matters as simple as, this person gets the job, this person does not get the job. And sometimes there's no rhyme or reason to it. I think about the best we can do is show up and be as prepared as we can be and try like hell and hope for the best, But the idea of going through a career without some serious heat and rejection and resentment, this happens. It just does. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but what I really believe at this stage of my life is a 56-year-old guy looking back on myself as a 17-year-old guy coming into it. You have to learn to be kind to yourself.
That's a big one. That is a big one, because I think that everything you said is spot on, but I also think that is, unless somebody pulled you aside at 17 or at 9 and said, hey, Gerry, if you go down this path, these are the things you're going to have to be prepared for. So if the landmine goes off, dodge and roll.
Yeah.
And just get back up and dust yourself off and keep going, because you'll get there, and you might have to dodge and roll a few more times. It's okay.
I was given a great piece of advice, and I think this is probably germane to this point of our conversation. You talk about landmines going off and the ability to bob and weave and dodge and roll and carry on. I was given a great piece of advice by a fantastic makeup artist named Emil Levine. When I was a boy, I was a teenager working in Mike Westmore's garage in studios. And Emil Levine is the guy that did the makeup for the Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz.
Oh my gosh, how amazing.
That's how far back Emil Levine went, and further. He was really something. He was cool. Emil Levine was the head of the makeup department on the original West Side Story. The Natalie.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he was cool. And he lived near Mike Westmore. And I discovered this somehow. And I used to go bug Emil Levine. And I was a teenager, and he was a guy in his 80s by that point, maybe his 90s. And he was delightful. He was a champion of young people, at least in my experience with him. And one of the great things he told me, and I think about this all the time, is to always have enough money in the bank to say no. His advice was, when you're starting out, we all started somewhere, say yes to everything. You need the experience. You just say yes, and you'll have good times, you'll have bad times, you'll have boring times. It's okay. You just say yes in the beginning to everything. But as you're saying yes to everything, and you're young and learning your way around, save money, put money in the bank. Because the day will come sooner than later when you are going to need to be able to say no. Based on your experience, you're going to come upon situations that are not good for you.
Yeah.
And that just you'll see the writing on the wall. It's like, this show is not good for me. These people aren't good for me. Nothing good has come of this. But in order to do that, you have to have the option to say no, to be secure. The utility bill is paid, the car insurance is paid. I'm okay. I don't need to jump this bus driven by nuts because I don't want to be a part of it. That was fantastic advice to give to a teenager.
Unbelievable, Gerry. Really, really priceless advice.
Yeah.
And I think that is something so imperative that unfortunately most don't get. Really, most don't get. And I think in our educational programs, unless we're lucky enough to be led by a bunch of professionals who can give us insight to life and the future, for, hey, these are the things you look towards, be it have good credit so you can have choices, have an ability, if not one but many, to make money, so you can always have passive income while you might be pursuing your actual passion. Always have reserves for your emergency, the emergency day or the emergency days, or for your future intentions. And the list goes on. And when I was first asked to speak in front of college advanced courses where they were about to graduate, go out into the world as artists, I was asked to come in, which I was like, why are you asking? It wasn't that I wasn't capable of speaking. I just didn't see myself as that seasoned soul at this moment to be qualified. But when I went in there and they thought I was going to share my portfolio, I was like, oh, no, I'm not sharing my portfolio. It has nothing to do with my not being proud. What I'm going to talk to you about is, you want to go out into the world and do what you're doing currently in this, cushy environment. Guess what? Here's the reality. If you don't have all your ducks in a row, you better start getting those ducks in a row, because no bank is going to care whether or not you can't qualify for a loan. No advertising agency is going to care if you don't have a space that you either rent, as a live-in workspace, or that you can qualify to rent for the day or the 30 days or however many days you need to shoot that campaign. Nobody cares if you can't come up with the materials. If you can't afford your materials to do your work, you can't do your work. It's no different than you and I. People, I was never the artist who relied upon my shows to supply my needs.
Yeah.
I always invested in me.
Yeah.
Me invested in me.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know lots of people that we work side by side with. It doesn't matter how you do this, but I know plenty of people who have built their makeup kits off of other productions' budgets.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I didn't run that way because I didn't come up that way. I didn't come up through a system. I didn't come up through apprenticing. I didn't come up through mentoring. I had to show up with it, or
Yeah.
else I didn't get the job and I couldn't deliver the job. I would imagine I'm not alone, but that's my own perspective.
Yeah.
I listen to people who don't, in our business, in our peer group, who look at it like they are owed something versus what they're bringing value to.
Yeah.
And I find that always, like, it always makes my head cock like a dog.
The dangerous mindset. That, oh, you owe me something. No, that's, yeah.
And
That's,
I find it, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that whole notion, and I've certainly encountered it plenty of times, that idea of, you owe me something, or the industry owes me something, or that really doesn't work.
No, and it is fascinating, and look at, I'm sure you've seen through decades and generations of people, either people that came before you set a different precedence, peers that you came up with were a different class unto themselves, and who has survived that and who hasn't, and now newer classes that are coming in, and maybe full of talent, but may also be full of entitlement. And I mean that with love, but I also think it's environmental.
Yeah.
And so my question to you is, what has been your observation? How have you seen the industry change? How has it made you as an artist look at things differently from when you entered to where you're at now?
That's a really great question, and I'm going to try to give you a really great answer. It's not a simple question. That's not a 90-second response, I don't think.
That's fine.
The big difference in the industry today that I'm seeing in 2022, as opposed to when I started back in the early and mid 1980s. And I can only tell you this from my perspective, of course.
Sure.
The big difference is me. As I've become older, and remember, I mean, I've been pursuing this career since I was a really little kid, and started working when I was a teenager, and now I'm a guy closer to 60 than I am to 50. The big difference is me. I don't have the patience. I don't have tolerance. I don't have that. I don't have the ability to suffer fools and foolishness the way I used to. I think the fools and the foolishness has always been there. Where I'm at is I've lost my I'm not going to say optimism. I consider myself to be a very optimistic person, but I've lost my ability to just slag through it in the name of slagging through it. I don't, I've done a lot. I've seen a lot, traveled the world, done all kinds of stuff, had successes and have had failures. And I've gotten to a point where I can see the problem before the problem starts. And more and more, I find, I'm looking at my watch saying, God, when can I just get out of here?
Right.
Which is why.
Do you think that's refined intuition, that you're listening to your gut and just paying attention to signs more, and that comes with just wisdom and experience?
I think so. And there's also, there's the reality of, again, I mean, I'm closer to 60 than I am to 50. How many more days do I want to go sit in a parking lot in Pomona with my box of Kleenex and my chapstick, waiting to jump in and do my thing? You start asking yourself questions after a while, after a few decades. And when you're on a show that's going well the actor the actors appreciate who you are and what you're trying to do for them. And it's good. There's nothing like it. It's wonderful. You're a part of a community. You're part of a group effort. You're all going in one direction. You're getting paid. You're getting your pension hours, your insurance hours, all that great stuff. But you hit a point in your career where you don't really need the money anymore because you've been doing this for decades. And you don't need the insurance hours anymore. You don't need all this stuff anymore. You start questioning, okay, what am I doing here? Which is why, I'm now officially semi-retired. Not that I won't go out on a job, I will, but the circumstances have to be really good. They have to, and it's not even a financial thing. You call me with the right thing, I'll go.
Right, right, of course.
And it's not that, I don't leave the door for less than X amount of money. No, that's not it at all. It's who am I going to be out there with? Who am I working for? What are the circumstances? That to me is everything now. The biggest difference that I've seen in the movies, I'm going to try to answer that one. Okay, I gave you, the answer I gave you, me being the biggest difference, that is reality. The biggest difference I've seen in the industry, it's just in the last few years, is how, movies that we used to do in 60 days, they're doing this stuff in 35 days now, 40 days. They're shooting with available light. They're not using film. They're not using, all those instruments and those systems that I grew up with don't exist anymore. So a movie now is, 30, 40 days, with some exceptions, obviously. I mean, I was having dinner last night with a pal. They just finished the new Indiana Jones movie, 146 days of photography. And I have to assume they were shooting on film. But so that's been a huge difference. The idea that they don't really cut, it's amazing. I was on a show a couple of years ago where my leading man is in a hospital bed crying. And he's supposed to have gone down a flight of steps and he's all beat up and he's scratched. And it was just paint, it was a painted makeup. It wasn't prosthetics and stuff. And he's laying there in this hospital bed. He's playing this very sad, very intense scene with this lovely actress. And he's crying. And 20 minutes into 20 minutes they shot this thing without a cut. You can do that with the technology today. His makeup is washing away all the bruising, all the hematoma, all this stuff that I've very painstakingly painted on him, going away. By the end of the scene, it was gone. It's just sort of, it's shocking. And there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do.
You can't say I'm stepping in.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Yeah. This isn't working for makeup anymore.
This isn't working for me.
Yeah, this isn't working for Gerry. Give me 5 minutes to dry him off and touch this up because it's nowhere near where we started. It's horrible.
It's really interesting. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. It's really interesting you say that because I don't know about you, but I remember when we started. You started a little earlier than I did, but I did start in the late 80s. Yeah. I started in fashion commercials. Did my first independent movie in 1989-90, and continued to head up movies until I came here, ironically. But there was an opportunity for you to say, "I need to step in."
Yeah.
And they would cut, let you do what you needed to do because they represented, they knew the value you brought to the table. They respected your craft. They respected the part of how you were helping tell the story and caring for your actor without you had to know how to do the dance and you had to know when you couldn't do that. Respectfully to your actor, your DP, your director, and everybody involved. But if you got that, if you knew when to jump into jump rope, you could do that.
Sure.
And now, like you said, with digital technology, I mean, my gosh, for those who don't know the industry, they well, Abby Singers and martinis are not Abby Singers and martinis. They don't even call an Abby Singer. And you and I aren't that old. And the martini is like an extended, like drop in another olive. Oh, there's the fourth olive, and then the onion. Is it a lemon or is it a dry? I mean, I don't know. I'm just making, I'm being silly, but
yeah, I'll tell you another. I want to say this while it's on my mind. Another huge change I've seen, and this is in very recent times, the whole idea of being able to do stuff in post. You and I know a lot of people that worked on Oz the Great and Powerful. Maybe you were on it.
I was.
But we know a lot of people that were.
Yeah.
And that was a huge movie that they did. And they shot forever. People were out there for months making that thing, and it was an epic. And they had characters in the show that were meant to be green, and they tested green. They tested. You can imagine. This is what we do. It's like, here's 20 different actors painted 20 different shades of green. Which one do you like? And they made a choice based on these tests. They shot their movie. And they had these green actors. Everything was cool. When the movie was released, these actors were no longer green. They were beige. Somewhere down the line, someone looked at all these green characters and said, nah, they're too green, or they're the wrong green. We don't like the green after all. And they could change it. That's the age we live in today. They could have painted these people fuchsia for all that it was going to matter. And
that brings me to this about being valued.
Yeah.
About being valued in what you do, about being valued in what we do, about being valued in where this is heading because of technology, and being an Academy member. And these have got to be discussions that come up in meetings. I don't think they come up so much in union meetings because that's a whole nother conversation but the truth is this has been a conversation that, let's see here. So the technology was really starting to change in the mid 2000s with high definition and digital cameras taking over film cameras. And I know this, because it was happening in still photography as well as in motion picture. And I remember plenty of DPs who were fighting it, young and mature, and having been a student of film and having been trained in all of that from a photography filmmaking background, I respected, what that was like to hold that value of film and processing and being able to adjust accordingly and really light something and do all the artistic things that need to be done to film that scene. And when the technology changed, boy, if somebody really didn't know how to light, or somebody really didn't understand a lens, or somebody didn't really understand the difference between lighting a landscape versus a beauty image of a woman over the age of 35, and a man for that matter, even though as we both know, men can get away with it differently, but can they? I mean, can they? Meaning you want to still be able to see their eyes. You want to be, unless of course it's like some mysterious, you're shooting some mysterious silhouette kind of imagery. My point to that is that, with these changes that have occurred and are occurring and will continue to occur, where do you see the value of our industry and our category? And now, speaking of the Academy and the Oscars and this whole, people being up in arms because they don't know if they're actually, even though supposedly, it's all going to be a part of the actual live show, just how they are valued in the whole scheme of the whole industry.
Mm.
Are we replacing actors and replacing makeup, or are we just replacing makeup? Or, you know what I mean? All those.
Well, I'll start with this in regard to the Academy and the Academy Awards and that stuff. And this is something to really keep in mind. The Academy Awards are a TV show.
Join me next week for part 2 of this amazing conversation with my dear friend Gerry Quist, Hollywood award-winning makeup artist. His perspective and his insights and his reflections are quite something. He's the real deal. And what I love about Gerry is he doesn't hold back, but he is so gracious and classy. So I look forward to you joining us for the remainder of this conversation. Subscribe, listen, share, have fun, and join me on the Fifi Uncensored podcast, where connections and conversations matter. Thank you so much for joining. Look forward to you joining next week. Bye for now.
I'm thinking about another thing that Emil Levine told me that I should share with your audience.
Yeah.
Boy, he was something else. Emil, another part of his wisdom, Emil said, always tell the truth. Always tell the truth. Even if it gets you fired, tell the truth. If you forgot to put the scar on the guy, or you got the bruise on the wrong side of his face, or whatever, tell the truth. Even if it costs you the job, even if you get sent out the door because of it. Because in the long run, you're going to develop a reputation that money can't buy. You become known as a person that has integrity and honor, and it can tell you the truth. And that's lacking in a lot of people in our industry.
Welcome to part 2 of my conversation with Gerry Quist on the Fifi Uncensored podcast. Thank you so much for joining. You are going to be in for quite a listen. Gerry Quist is a professional, award-winning makeup artist in film and television, and my friendship with him has been such a joyous occasion every time we sit down and talk. And the conversation that we had a couple months ago on this podcast is so reflective and so poignant and so timely, because it was literally days before the Academy Award occurred. I want you to get a really great perspective on how that, from the timing of everything going forward, what he has shared. In addition, we spoke at a time that Gerry, being Bruce Willis's personal makeup artist, had yet revealed Bruce's health circumstances. So again, just the timing of everything has been just so precious and really insightful, and I look forward to you hearing Gerry's takeaways from his career and where he is at today. So pull up a chair, get that coffee, get that cannoli, get whatever it takes to have a good time. Sit down, listen, be entertained, and share with your friends. Join and subscribe. Look forward to you being a part of this next hour, and thank you for being a part of the Fifi Uncensored community. Bye for now.
When you're on a show that's going well, and the actors appreciate who you are and what you're trying to do for them, and it's good, there's nothing like it. It's wonderful. You're a part of a community. You're part of a group effort. You're all going in one direction. You're getting paid. You're getting your pension hours, your insurance hours, all that great stuff. But you hit a point in your career where you don't really need the money anymore, because you've been doing this for decades. and you don't need the insurance hours anymore. You don't need all this stuff anymore. You start questioning, okay, what am I doing here? Which is why, I'm now officially semi-retired. Not that I won't go out on a job, I will, but the circumstances have to be really good. They have to, and it's not even a financial thing. You call me with the right thing, I'll go.
Right, right, of course.
And it's not that, I don't leave the door for less than X amount of money. No, that's not it at all. It's who am I going to be out there with? Who am I working for? What are the circumstances? That to me is everything now. The biggest difference that I've seen in the movies, I'm going to try to answer that one. Okay, I gave you, the answer I gave you, me being the biggest difference, that is reality. The biggest difference I've seen in the industry, it's just in the last few years, is how, movies that we used to do in 60 days, they're doing this stuff in 35 days now, 40 days. They're shooting with available light. They're not using film. They're not using, all those instruments and those systems that I grew up with don't exist anymore. So a movie now is, 30, 40 days, with some exceptions, obviously. I mean, I was having dinner last night with a pal. They just finished the new Indiana Jones movie, 146 days of photography. And I have to assume they were shooting on film. But so that's been a huge difference. The idea that they don't really cut, it's amazing. I was on a show a couple of years ago where my leading man is in a hospital bed crying. And he's supposed to have gone down a flight of steps, and he's all beat up and he's scratched. And it was just paint, it was a painted makeup. It wasn't prosthetics and stuff. And he's laying there in this hospital bed. He's playing this very sad, very intense scene with this lovely actress. And he's crying. And 20 minutes into 20 minutes they shot this thing without a cut. You can do that with the technology today. His makeup is washing away all the bruising, all the hematoma, all this stuff that I very painstakingly painted on him, going away. By the end of the scene, it was gone. It's just sort of, it's shocking. And there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do.
You can't say I'm stepping in.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Yeah. This isn't working for makeup anymore.
This isn't working for me.
Yeah, this isn't working for Gerry. Give me 5 minutes to dry him off and touch this up because it's nowhere near where we started. It's horrible.
It's really interesting. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. It's really interesting you say that, because I don't know about you, but I remember when you started a little earlier than I did, but I did start in the late 80s. Yeah. I started in fashion commercials, did my first independent movie in 1989-90. Yeah. And continued to head up movies until I came here, ironically. But there was an opportunity for you to say, I need to step in.
Yeah.
And they would cut, let you do what you needed to do because they represented, they knew the value you brought to the table. They respected your craft. They respected the part of how you were helping tell the story and caring for your actor without you had to know how to do the dance, and you had to know when you couldn't do that. Yeah. Respectfully to your actor, your DP, your director, and everybody involved. But if you got that, if you knew when to jump in to jump rope, you could do that.
Sure.
And now, like you said, with digital technology, I mean, my gosh, for those who don't know the industry, they Abby Singers and martinis are not Abby Singers and martinis. They don't even call an Abby Singer. And you and I aren't that old. And the martini is like an extended, like drop in another olive. Oh, there's the fourth olive and then the onion. Is it a lemon or is it a dry? I mean, I don't know. I'm just making, I'm being silly, but.
Yeah, I'll tell you another. I want to say this while it's on my mind. Another huge change I've seen, and this is in very recent times, the whole idea of being able to do stuff in post. You and I know a lot of people that worked on Oz the Great and Powerful. Maybe you were on it. I was. But we know a lot of people that were.
Yeah.
And that was a huge movie that they did. And they shot forever. People were out there for months making that thing, and it was an epic. And they had characters in the show that were meant to be green, and they tested green. They tested. You can imagine. This is what we do. It's like, here's 20 different actors painted 20 different shades of green. Which one do you like? And they made a choice based on these tests. They shot their movie. And they had these green actors. Everything was cool. When the movie was released, these actors were no longer green. They were beige. Somewhere down the line, someone looked at all these green characters and said, nah, they're too green, or they're the wrong green. We don't like the green after all. And they could change it. That's the age we live in today. They could have painted these people fuchsia for all that it was going to matter. And that
brings me to this about being valued.
Yeah.
About being valued in what you do, about being valued in what we do, about being valued in where this is heading because of technology, and being an Academy member. And these have got to be discussions that come up in meetings. I don't think they come up so much in union meetings because that's a whole nother conversation that, but the truth is this has been a conversation that, let's see here. So the technology was really starting to change in the mid 2000s with high definition and digital cameras taking over film cameras. And I know this, because it was happening in still photography as well as in motion picture. And I remember plenty of DPs who were fighting it, young and mature, and having been a student of film and having been trained in all of that from a photography filmmaking background, I respected, what that was like to hold that value of film and processing and being able to adjust accordingly and really light something and do all the artistic things that need to be done to film that scene. And when the technology changed, how, boy, oh boy, if somebody really didn't know how to light, or somebody really didn't understand a lens, or somebody didn't really understand the difference between lighting a landscape versus a beauty image of a woman over the age of 35, and a man for that matter, even though as we both know, men can get away with it differently, but can they? I mean, can they? Meaning you want to still be able to see their eyes. You want to be, unless of course it's like some mysterious, you're shooting some mysterious silhouette kind of imagery. My point to that is that, with these changes that have occurred and are occurring and will continue to occur, where do you see the value of our industry and our category? And now, speaking of the Academy and the Oscars and this whole, people being up in arms because they don't know if they're actually, even though supposedly, it's all going to be a part of the actual live show, just how they are valued in the whole scheme of the whole industry. Are we replacing actors and replacing makeup, or are we just replacing makeup? Or, what I mean? All those.
Well, I'll start with this, in regard to the Academy and the Academy Awards and that stuff. And this is something to really keep in mind. The Academy Awards are a TV show.
Yes.
And it's produced and presented in a way to certainly acknowledge people's accomplishments. And it's a good opportunity to look at the state of the art of film in any given year. But it is a TV show, and it's designed and produced to be entertaining. And
Correct.
The Academy Awards don't have good ratings.
They don't.
They don't get that advertising revenue.
No.
You sell commercial time. The Academy exists because of that advertising revenue. That's what really pays the bills and makes all these programs that the Academy is involved with. What makes it possible is that's their big deal. They've got that show they do once a year with whatever movie stars and or celebrities, personalities of the day, in the hope that the world is going to tune in to see these interesting people doing interesting things. And if they don't sell advertising to that, they have no purchase. So the idea that they're trying all these different things. The Academy is, I think it's always been a very dynamic institution. I mean, it's run by a lot of creative people, and it's run by a lot of very smart people that have to make decisions about what to do with money and all that. It encompasses some very interesting personalities. And every year they're trying to think of something. What can we do? They want Super Bowl ratings.
Of course.
And they're not getting it right now. They haven't had.
No, they're not.
That's what they want. And so
of course. And they should want that.
Absolutely. So they're trying to make the show leaner, more engaging, more relevant. They're basically pulling anything out of their hat they can think of to make it a show that people really want to watch and stay with. And lately, it just hasn't been happening. So,
and do you think that is because you said, and listen, I understand the advertising, I understand the Academy, I understand the reputation, I understand how this leads and carries like the ball for the whole institution. It is the poster child for the institution. Sure. And I'm all for it. I also know that, as people, as in this particular case, this year, for instance, yes, I've been very cognizant over many years how all the changes. My spouse happens to work on this show. So every year for over 22 years of us being together, he's been very deeply involved with that project of many of its ilk. And, and I just myself, even if that weren't a reality, I myself pay very close attention to the business and how that's presented and how it relates to the world at large and all the things. And I think where I'm going with this and my question to you is, you use the Super Bowl and you use the Oscars. What's interesting is, even though the Super Bowl is a big presentation and it's a big source of entertainment, do you think that it's more relatable to people than the Oscars may be, in the sense of just like, watching people get dressed up and being on a red carpet and, and talking about themselves versus, a bunch of guys who work as a team, and though it's a big business and we know behind closed doors, there's a lot of upwriting over the, protesting over plenty of the issues in that world of, racism and payment and, mental health. And so it kind of runs parallel.
Yeah.
Many of the same issues, ego, pride, money, business, all the things, it's all equal.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
and people's, go ahead. I'm sorry, sweetie. Go ahead.
I think that the idea that more people follow the Super Bowl, I think that that environment, that world is so much more relatable to most people.
Exactly.
You know,
it's like the blue collar man that can possibly be out on that field versus the woman who's like, I'll never look like Charlize Theron. I'll never be, 6 foot tall and blonde South African who's got a team chasing after her and putting her together. Like, that's a true statement.
Yes.
Want to be?
Yes.
Will I ever be?
I have a theory. I think part of now, and I have to be honest with you, I don't follow sports professionally. Surprise, Gerry Quist doesn't watch football or baseball or any of it. I don't care. It's just I'm not interested in it. Never have been. But I've certainly seen my fair share of movies and continue to, and I see a hell of a lot of theater.
Yeah. Which is why I love you, Gerry.
I think that there's a lot of there's a tendency among people that get the type of recognition that comes along with an Academy Award. They feel this compulsion to express their politics, their philosophy, their life, wherever their head is at. For this, and this is nothing new. This has been going on for
forever.
And people will use that as a platform to talk about some sort of deep-held belief they have. And I think there's a certain amount of fatigue that's come into the zeitgeist of our society. You turn one of these shows on, you're gonna hear something. Some legend, some stellar personality of our time is gonna get up and make a dig at somebody over something, some sort of a political issue that has nothing to do with the motion picture industry or the story told or the work that they did that got them to that place. And I think there's fatigue in that. I'm not sure you see that so much. You see it in organized sports, of course. There's demonstrations and things.
Oh, sure.
But they don't have the kind of platform that some of our modern celebrities have, where they can get up there.
No.
Thank you for this award. Thank you for this recognition. And by the way, I think people are sick of it. I know I am. I don't want to know. And this is something that has developed with me just over the passage of time. I don't want to know that much about them. If I like their performance, if I like how they're practicing their craft as an actor, I'd like to leave it there.
Well, that's interesting. You spend a lot of time, and I didn't mean to cut you off, but you spend a lot of time with certain individuals, or have in the past, for months on end, and years on end in some cases.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. How do you keep that where you don't go into the deep end, and that you preserve yourself and that relationship? How have you treaded that water?
Yeah, it's not always easy, because there's I have a point of view, I have a belief system, I have things I agree with and don't agree with, and it's not always an easy thing to do. I hearken back to watching my dad in his barber shop for all those years, where hey, he was a working class guy with a wife and 2 kids and a house payment, and he was being of service to people that were worth a heck of a lot more money and had a heck of a lot more influence and a much higher profile. And he had to serve them. And it was his pleasure to serve them. He liked what he did. So it was all good. So I try to put myself into that mindset. I've had different celebrity clients over the years. Some of them I've got to do multiple things with, and some just 1 or 2. The longest celebrity, the longest genuinely big name, high profile person I worked with was Bruce Willis.
Yes.
And I did, 20, 30 movies, maybe more with him over a 25-year period,
It's
including
incredible.
commercials and a lot of press junkets and on and on and on. That was a big deal. And to be very, really put a conversation like this is no fun if you don't tell the truth.
Agreed. Agreed.
Bruce and I we have a lot in common. We both really like movies. We talk about movies all the time. Old movies, new movies, whatever. Talk about reading. He was a big reader, as am I. We would talk a lot about food. Where are you going to eat? Where's good? And we liked the same kind of food. And we would talk about this stuff, at length.
Yeah.
And as my work with him, as the years turned into decades that so many of his shows, we would go out together sometimes and hit the local restaurant or whatever. And the point of this story, the point of what I'm telling you is that we kept it light, even in private moments. And the fact of the matter is, I really couldn't tell you a lot about his politics because I just don't know. It's a topic that we avoided. There are people that you can't spend 5 minutes with them without it becoming a discussion about, fill in the blank, whatever
Right.
or whatever thing is going on in the world stage at any given moment.
Right.
The work I did with Bruce for so many years just had nothing to do with that. We talked a lot about life. He was also a funny person, hysterically funny, without trying to be. He wasn't so much a guy that, hey, I heard this joke. No, he would just start talking about his life, and it would. It's just such a.
One of the best movies, one of my favorite Bruce Willis movies that I believe we discussed and talked about because a client of mine had done that movie with you.
Yeah.
Which was The Kid.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah.
Such a profoundly deep movie that you just didn't see coming.
Yeah.
And walked away like really thinking about it, really being moved by it, really going like, here you think you're walking into a comedy and you're going in deep.
Yeah.
And he was so good in it. And it was so like, I think we discussed this on Santa Claus 3, I think, is when you and I had our real first kind of exchange in that way. And I remember sharing with you, so this had to have been like 2003, 4, that I was really touched by that project, and it just caught me completely off guard. And my husband and I weren't married at the time, I don't think, we hadn't gotten married yet. But we walked away from that movie just like, it's the who would have thunk kind of thing.
Yeah.
You did not know that this was going to be a movie you're going to walk away and talk about the life that was being presented and the things you would think about life. And yet this movie was profoundly putting it out there unexpectedly.
Yeah. The Kid turned out to be quite a good movie, and it was well received too. It found an audience. People really went.
And I love that. So speaking of which,
and something I want to tell you about The Kid. This is, anybody listening to this conversation that's newer in it than you and I hated making The Kid. I was unhappy every day of that shoot. It was miserable to work on. And I'm not going to go into why it was miserable because
sure,
there at this point. I'd tell you privately, but I did not have a good time there. I was happy to be there with Bruce. That part was fine. I got on okay, but it was I did not like the experience. I didn't it was not good. And it took a lot of, we were talking a little earlier about how the biggest change I've seen in the industry is me. As a much younger guy, I had a higher tolerance for some of the nonsense. The kid took every bit of, I guess the word is discipline.
Yeah.
Just to get through it. And when it was over, I was really happy. And
Yeah.
I've heard it said that some of the best movies were made under great duress. That long about the time you're on a show where everybody loves everybody and it's all going so well. Oh my God, I can't wait to get to work in the morning. Very often you come up with garbage.
Yes.
And the kid for me was just such an unhappy experience.
It really is fascinating because that is, I mean,
yeah.
Pardon?
I
Say
said
it again.
He came up with a good movie, so there you go.
Well, this just goes to show that you don't know what goes on behind closed doors.
Yeah.
That's where that story has the story. How we really don't know what we think we know. We have no idea. We have zero knowledge.
Absolutely correct. I'm the guy. And again, for anybody listening to this that has less experience than you and I read the script for The Sixth Sense. They sent it to me about a half a year before the movie got made. I knew I was going to go do it. And I didn't like the script. I didn't like anything about it. I didn't like the little boy in peril. I just, it was the subject matter. I didn't like it.
Yeah.
And we made the movie, and it was a good professional experience. I saw the movie. I got to go to a screening of it at Disney before it was released to the public. And I saw the movie, and I didn't like it. I didn't like the whole thing about that poor little kid and that, peril and the whole didn't like it. And it turned out to be maybe the most successful movie of the year. The Sixth Sense made crazy success, and you couldn't have told it by me.
I relate to this completely. I literally I get that so much, and it is baffling without any, and it is baffling what the audience wants or how it's marketed or the combination or the timing or just energetically what's happening that you can't predict even when you're really in tune and sensitive to things. Oh my God, it makes me think of like a project like this being the TV series Dexter. Dexter becomes this huge success. I was reached out to head this project up at the very beginning. And I'll never forget the phone conversation with the executive producers. They just wanted to know two things. Was I available to do it, and could I make him look like he lived in Miami and maintain a couple day growth? And I thought, you're talking about a sociopath. You're talking about a series of events, of killings and all these things that you're going to see. There's so much more than whether or not he's going to be able to maintain a look like he lives in Miami and his 2-day growth. Like that's so that is so handled 10 years ago.
Yeah.
My response was, well, it certainly isn't a comedy.
Yeah.
And they were just baffled by that statement. And I was just being light.
Yeah.
Because it was so heavy and so dark.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, well, they're either gonna want me now or they're not, even though they were seeking me out. And we, and that did not happen. And I was perfectly fine with it, no matter how much success. And there's other projects that our dear friends that we will not mention and all those things that I am continuously dumbfounded at the level of success that these projects have run with. have made them multi-millionaires
Yeah.
that people can't get enough of, that I would never, ever, as a kid coming up, would go, I'll put my money on that. I put my money on a lot of things that have literally, figuratively speaking, that have definitely flown to the top. Yeah. And I'll start with Oprah. In 1983, I slipped literally a handwritten letter under her door way before anybody knew of her, and proceeded to predict her future. And that sounds really lofty, but that's a true statement.
That's cool.
It's a true statement. My senior year of college, my friend's condominium in Chicago, in the Water Tower place that had, been just built a decade before, not even a decade before, erected. And this couple, one of my dearest friends in college, his parents, and he grew up in Ohio, were plucked out of Ohio by Ray Kroc, who created McDonald's.
Sure.
Sent them to England, where they launched McDonald's and made them multi-millionaires. Have a home in Chicago because they're now back in the Illinois area. And we're hanging out one weekend at their place. And just so happens that my friend Chuck happens to say, yeah, this one by the name of Oprah moved in across the hall. And I went, wait a minute, what? Oprah moved in across? And everybody else looked at me like, what? Who's Oprah? What do you care, Felicia? And I was like, this woman's going to become somebody, you guys. You have no idea who she is, but I'm here to tell you she is going to be the thing. And of course, my friends looked at me like, whatever, Felicia, whatever. Yeah. I sat there tediously handwriting this passionate letter my name is, I'm graduating. I love talk shows. You're going to be the biggest thing ever. I would love to come work with you. Blah, 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 blah. Wow. Oh yeah, it was everything. And ironically, slipped under the door. I'm sure, I don't know. I will never know. Well, I can't say I will never know. I will say up to this point, I do not know if she would remember or how she would have responded, knowing that it's a secure building. How the hell did this handwritten letter get slipped under my door? So that in and of itself could have been very what the, but I ended up working with the King brothers, who at the time owned 51 shares of CBS. Yeah. And the King brothers, I actually was pursuing to produce my first movie script that I had written, that I was going to that my intention was co-produce with the Swedish government. And this is all during, being a makeup artist. This is in the 90s and late 90s. I've been working with all the SCTV people. I was in the time working with Marty Short. And long story short, I ended up doing this piece, I think it was for Bravo, was a documentary about how the King brothers came into their money, and it had to do with the story that their father had bought the rights to the Three Stooges. Oh my God. And from there, their history was made. That's how they ended up owning Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy, the longest running, syndicated shows, made them all their money. How they leverage themselves. One of the brothers was $1 million gambler every night in the VIP rooms. And, the other brother was the one who ran the business. And so I was like, well, great. They throw money away every day. They'll front me at $5 million to do an independent movie at the time. I have my actors, they're award winning. They love my script. Let's go. What's to hesitate over? Yeah. We don't meet them until years later, doing this project, when this story comes up, not because I would ever thought the story would ever get presented, but this man liked me. He liked what I did. I adored everything that fell out of his mouth while telling this documentary. He was smart. He was insightful. He was sensitive. He was thoughtful. I was like, I want to write this man's book. I just thought he was just amazing. And he asked me after we did this documentary if I would actually help him take off his makeup up in his bedroom. And he was a married man and all, there was none of it. I was shocked, but yeah, sure. Well, from my being open to, taking care of this client, one thing led to another. And this conversation, because he asked me about things regarding, and I don't want to really get into like the minute details, but he was asking me about randomly asked me why I thought certain projects were successful or not successful. And I shared my insights. And he just looked at me like I was no longer a makeup artist, man. I was somebody who he felt had my finger on the pulse. Mm. And I'm not saying that in an ego way. I'm saying that based upon he was like, I want to invite you to sit down. I have more questions to ask. Great. Okay, sure. And eventually this whole thing about Oprah comes up, and the whole thing comes up about writing the letter. And his question to me was, did she respond? Mm. And I said, no. And his look of disappointment, knowing that this was pre-Harpo, this was pre-syndication, this was pre her even becoming national, let alone international, just spoke volumes to me. And this is not a negative towards her. That's not the point. No. The point is, you can't predict what something's going to be like. You read a script or you have these interactions with people. You don't know how big things are going to get or how never they're going to make it off the shelf. You don't know who you're going to align with and how that's going to fly. Did you know when you first aligned with Bruce Willis that you were going to have 30, movies in together and have a career being a personal? You can't predict how this dream of that little boy. So it's ironic that you said the kid was, the experience it was for you, because I was about to ask you, what was your best job? What was your best year? What was your best location? What was your best experience? Like as a boom, 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 fire, fire, fire. What would you say to those things?
Okay, I'll start off. What was my best job?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh gosh, it changes.
Okay.
I've had a few that were pretty sweet. My out-of-pocket answer to that right now is going to be Mr. Holland's Opus. And it was just a really good movie.
Yes.
I got to read it before we did it, and I just personally and professionally, it was a fantastic experience. It was doing the type of makeup that I enjoyed. I got to do everything from I got to do a lot of beauty makeup in it from the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. There was age makeup in the show, and subject matter. I was doing the type of work on the type of project that I wanted to do. And
such a great story.
I was working for a great makeup artist called Ken Chase, was the department and the designer of the show. And I was Ken's second. And I was very, very happy to be there with him. He was a lovely guy. And I learned a lot from him. And it was everything about it. And Mr. Holland's Opus, I mean, this is the way things go. And this is good for people to understand. Mr. Holland's Opus was also the worst show for some people on the crew. I was there at that time in 1994 having, one of the best things I was ever going to be associated with. And I was aware that there were people on the show that were having a really bad time. And that happens.
All the time.
One person's triumph is another person's failure.
Yeah.
So Mr. Holland's Opus, like right now, that's my favorite movie. You had another great question
Best
there.
Year.
Best year?
Yeah.
I've had some good ones. I'm grateful. I'm very grateful for that. Right off the top of my head, I'm going to say 1996 was a fantastic year. Just working on types of shows with types of people that I wanted to do, and things were falling into place for me. So I'd say 1996 off the top of my head. 2012 was a really good one too. 2018 was a really good one. I've been fortunate, you know. I've had more good than bad. I remember, you know, I think that 2003, I had nothing. I remember that year. I remember 2003, nothing was happening, which wasn't necessarily a bad thing. But my best years, off the top of my head, I'm going to say 1996 and 2012 were really, really good. And I think you had
Amazing.
a question about
what was your best location?
Wow. Okay. The movie was no big shakes. Working on it wasn't any big, I mean, it wasn't a bad experience or anything, but the locations we got to do were spectacular. I did a movie called Red 2, which was a sequel to a movie called Red, starring Bruce Willis. And on Red 2, I got to live in Paris for weeks. We were in Paris for several weeks, and then I got to live in London for a couple of months. And that was back in 2012. And I was coming right off the heels. This is hard to say with a straight face. I was the makeup department head for Die Hard 5. Like, the world just had to have it.
Is that the promo line? The world just had to have it. So we made it.
Have it. So we made it. I got to go to Budapest. I got to live in Budapest for it felt like a year. I think I was there for 5 or 6 or 7 months. I can't remember. I was in Budapest for a long time making that movie because we couldn't afford to go to Russia. Originally we were going to go to Moscow and make the movie, but it just got too expensive. So we had to go to Budapest. And that was a great location. And then
I bet.
And that same year, I got to go to Paris and then to London. So that's favorite.
That was a good year of locations for sure.
You bet.
100%. So I know you mentioned Mr. Holland's Opus. We've mentioned Red 2. We've mentioned, you know, the diehards. There's obviously others, you know, from your Star Treks and Orville's and Perry Masons and Westworld. That's, you know, that's more television.
Sure.
You know, you've had a slew. I mean, when you've done 30 movies roughly with Bruce, there's lots of movies. You've also worked with people like Ben Affleck, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, another obviously well-established person in our industry, from producing to writing to acting, directing.
Yeah.
What has been your best experience? Would it have been the Mr. Holland's Opus, or what, you know, let me just re-ask, what was your best experience?
And again, I have to go back to a place of gratitude where I've had a few.
Mm-hmm.
I can give you an answer to that question that it's accurate right now. If you ask me the same question tomorrow, I might give you a different answer. The first movie I did with Bruce Willis, where I was just taking care of him, I had met Bruce on a movie called Death Becomes Her. And
oh my God.
And I was helping, I was running a lot of foam latex on Death Becomes Her for my friend Kevin Haney, who designed the show. It was his project. And then I was asked to go to Switzerland to assist with Bruce's age makeup. They had a whole sequence in the original version of Death Becomes Her that nobody ever saw. We saw Bruce as an old man. He was supposed to be like 80, having a picnic with Tracy Ullman on the lake, on the shore of Lake Lucerne in Switzerland. And Tracy Ullman isn't even in the movie now. but anyway, that's neither here nor there. That's when I first met Bruce, and I was assisting, but I got to know him a little bit. And then in 1995, I was asked to do an obscure little movie that nobody's ever seen called Last Man Standing. And it was a 1930s gangster movie that took place in the West, like in a ghost town. And I was just doing Bruce's makeup on it, and he had to get beaten up. He had sequences where he had to look like a handsome leading man, and then he gets beaten half to death, and he heals up over a period of weeks. Yeah, and that was just so exciting to be a part of.
Yeah,
it was wonderful, and I got to build all this stuff, and that was my first time out of the box where I was in charge of the makeup on a leading man on a big movie, shot right here in Los Angeles, and that was something else. It was fun, and I think I think my inner child says the reason I liked it so much is I was so appreciated.
Yeah.
The director was a wonderful man called Walter Hill, who was totally into what I was trying to do, totally into it, totally supportive.
Yeah.
Bruce was totally into it and totally supportive. And it was great. It was just a really great experience. That whole.
Well, go ahead. Sorry, honey.
It was just fantastic. It's like, if you wrote it down on paper, this is how I want this project to be. I couldn't have written it out any better than what turned out to be the reality.
But there's so much said in that, in that statement. You were valued, you were appreciated, you got to rise to the occasion, you got to be honored and seen for who you showed up being. And everybody was on the same page, raising you up and holding you there. And you were, you were getting to shine within the part that you were part of. And that's not difficult. Matter of fact, energetically, it's easier to be a part of that than to struggle and sludge through energies that are going against you and not wanting you to shine and wanting you to dim your light and not being appreciative and of valuing you. So that's an interesting thing, because if you could have that be the break the mold situation and have all jobs in the ideal world be that, which is not to be delusional or illusional, but we are creating illusions. So why can't we, behind the scenes, actually show up and have those environments that support us as artists doing this business that we're in and make it the most pleasant of situations? Is a big question to me, because I certainly know as a film student, I thought I was aligning with a bunch of intellects who are going to come together, create these great life stories through a source of entertainment, through all these elements brought together. And, that's what we're going to continue to do. And when I say intellects, I don't mean like, here versus here. I don't mean that. I just mean like people who were passionate about telling story and they brought all their crafts together. I think personally, what has, going back to best experience, I think what surprises me is, like you, I have experiences that made me cry every day going to work for good reasons. Going to work for Bob Altman, I cried every day out of just sheer joy. Yeah. And this man did not want me there. He did not want me there because he didn't believe in personals. And I was a personal. My personal paid for me to be there initially. And day one, we had to do a makeup test, and it was my client was Lily Tomlin and Meryl Streep, and they were playing sisters. And literally we're doing a test that's going to turn into a movie poster within the movie. And there's a bunch of us in this room, and they've gone through hair and makeup, and they've got all, and they're there in front of the camera and all that stuff. And Altman's sitting in, so many rows up. And he turns to me as he see me walk in and done touch up and whatever. He turns to me and he was like, You can stay, kid.
Ah, nice.
And
Nice.
I was just like,
There you go.
yeah, I was pretty speechless. And I
Yes.
was so in gratitude. I was grateful to Lily for, recognizing what love I made to her face every day.
You bet.
And I was grateful to this man who was, so well established and carried and good, bad, or otherwise, because God knows his reputation had a lot, even for all the masterful pieces. He wasn't always an easy man supposedly to work with, depending upon what he was using or not using that year or that show or whatever. But at the time that I got to him was his last movie. He had cancer. They couldn't even insure the movie. So Paul Thomas Anderson shadowed him so they could make the movie. He was getting cancer treatments every Thursday on location. We were in St. Paul, Minnesota. So for all I know, they were sending him to Mayo, for God's sake, which, would have made perfect sense.
Yeah.
And we had a cast of characters, starting with Meryl on down, like some real heavy hitters. And it was one of those moments. So not about me. Let's go back to you. When it comes to politics, business, reality, where do you see that take place in the realm of how we do our business and telling story and behind the scenes, in front of scenes? Like, how do you just
well, in terms of the politics and the business of being on a movie set, there's a reason why I did all those years as a personal, not only to Bruce, but with some other people as well, but mainly certainly with Bruce. When you go in as a personal, and I think that Robert Altman probably, he was aware of this. When you go in with somebody like Bruce Willis, or fill in the blank, somebody who's big enough to get a movie financed.
Yeah.
When you're going in to be as personal service to an actor of that status,
caliber,
you go in with a hell of a lot of power, whether you like it or not, and you have the power to demand a very good salary. You have the power to demand a lot of things.
Yes.
And you don't have to fight for them. You don't have to quibble about getting a rental car or a specific per diem or whatever. Just
correct.
That your life gets a lot easier. And it's just the reality of this business. The closer you are to number one on the call sheet, the better your situation is going to be.
Right.
And I fell into that very easily as a guy, as a young man, not 30 years old. And I saw the writing on the wall. And I was pretty good at it too. I was good at focusing on an actor. I was good at trying to provide for a person. And I came to real sometimes it can be a very difficult job.
Very difficult job.
And it can be, and it's not a bad idea in order, when it comes to making your movie run smoothly. You've got the main makeup department that has their own litany of concerns and problems. To have one person or two people, in the case of the Bruce movies, typically I was there with a hairstylist. And we would just focus on that character. The conversation they got very simple, and it alleviated a lot of problems. It creates problems too. The funny thing is, looking back on it, I remember conversations about, oh my God, it's so expensive. It's so expensive. They always find the money somehow.
Listen, if the cause and effect is going to be you make somebody happy so they want to show up and do their job,
Yeah.
and you get what you need and you get it within the time frame that you want, you actually are saving money. It's a big oversighted kind of way of going, we either make the cake right or we make it where it tastes awful. So what choice do you want to make? Oh, I want the cake that goes down smooth. Let's do it this way. Like, it's really know how to serve, know how to please. It doesn't belittle you as long as you're not being abused. But being a personal is an art. There's an art. There is an art. And you and I were raised in industries with our families that I think served us well to become that. But what I find interesting, and not be negative, is it really does, and I don't know if this also has to do with male, female, or just who you're aligned with in the circles, but I have definitely gotten everything from honor value to wanting to throw you under the bus because you showed up as their personal.
Yes. And there's also, another part of that equation is you might be an ideal personal for someone for a while.
Yeah.
And then things change.
Yeah.
And you're not their ideal personal anymore and you move on.
Yeah. And that brings me to, future goals and legacy, and change being all evolution of life as we started out this conversation.
Yeah.
And I want to wrap up this conversation is with you being in semi-retirement, with your future, you're still a young man.
Yeah.
With your goals and legacy, what you want to leave, how you want to leave this world, what do you want to contribute besides what you've already contributed on screen? Where do you see that for yourself going forward? You've got another 30, 40 years.
Sure.
At least.
Yeah, people in my family tend to live pretty old.
Yeah, you're here. You're here. We got a lot more coffee to have together. So don't think you're getting away with that.
I don't smoke. I don't drink. I'm on. I eat more than I should, but okay.
Please, we're kindred spirits. Like this is where you come. So we talk about everything from soup to nuts, and don't forget the cannolis, egg in the holes, and the s'mores. Like, you're in the right place.
Where, it's hard to think in terms of legacy, but I'll try. I started out as a very young person, as a guy in my teens, in my very early adolescence. I wanted to be a makeup artist and I wanted to work in the movies, and I got to do that. And when I got into the big league union system here in Los Angeles, I was told the thing to shoot for is 60,000 hours of service and 30 years. That's what you needed to qualify for a full pension from the IA, from our union. You had to have 60,000 hours minimum and 30 years of service. And that was a big goal. And I pushed and pushed and pushed. And I said yes to all sorts of things, some of which I shouldn't have said yes to, just to achieve that. It was an honorable. Yeah. And you know what? A few years ago, I hit that. I have way more than 60,000 hours, and I've got way more than 30 years of service. And I am faced with this chapter of my life. I don't need to do this anymore, and frankly, I don't want to do it on the level that I was. Very selective. My business goal right now, in terms of the motion picture industry, I'll work, but I want to work with people that I like, doing stuff that I like. I don't need to be the head of the department. I don't need to be doing number one on the call sheet. Some of the happiest times I've spent as a makeup artist, just as a craftsman out there, some of the happiest times I've had are when I'm making up monkey number 32 to the left. I'm throwing dirt on cowboys or whatever.
Yeah.
been really, really good times.
Yeah.
And in terms of a legacy, I'd like to be available to, if there's any experience, strength, and hope that I can share with people, I'd like to do that. I don't really see myself teaching at a makeup school or anything of that nature, but I'm thinking that life will probably put me in a position where I'm able to talk to people that are, say, starting out in their careers and just help them along somehow. Just, if nothing else, just to realize certain realities about what we make, about what we do for a living. This is a fantastic industry, and I really, when I was coming in, I'm sure when you were coming in, when all of us come in, you hear about, oh, it's not the way it used to be. Oh, back in the 60s or back in the 70s or back in the 50s, it was, it was so much, you know what, maybe it was better. I don't know. But I do know that this is still a heck of a great industry, and it's a wonderful way to make a living. But you have to be aware of certain pitfalls. And I'd like to be in a position where I can share some of that with people coming in. There are certain pitfalls and there are certain benefits, and you got to play the benefits against the pitfalls. My long-term legacy, I think, probably, in as much as I don't see myself working at a makeup school, I just don't want to somehow. I have friends that have done that, and they haven't been altogether pleased with it. I like the idea of kicking around for another few years, and if I go a year or two without working, that's okay too. I have plenty of interests. I have plenty to keep me busy. COVID was useful for that because so many of us have sat around for months and months with nothing to do, and I came to discover during that time that my life is pretty full. Things are good. I don't have to. I'm not getting up at 2 a.m. to go sit in a parking lot in Pomona unless I want to.
Yeah.
So my legacy, a scary word.
It's a big word.
It's a big word. It's a big word because it just implies a lot of different things. I want to be in a position where I can be of service to people in some way, shape, or form. And I'm not really sure how that's going to manifest itself in my life. I'm looking forward to it. I'm not running away from our industry. I'm just being reflective.
Yeah.
And hoping that along the line, people get involved in some very unhealthy stuff in our line of work. And it doesn't need to be that way. So I'm hoping that somewhere down the line, I can really be of use to people. That's, I don't know if I answered your question or not.
No, I mean, there is no right or wrong answer, for one. It's not for me to judge. That is your truth. And it's an honorable statement. And, it's interesting because as I heard it, and I was thinking of this overall, just image of that. And I was asking myself, would that be with young kids or would that be with an older generation? The irony is what came up for me was it was more leaning towards an older generation than it was even people coming into this world. And the reason why I think that came up for me was because you are respectful and you do have dignity and grace, and you do have an older soul. And I think that you have a respect for your elders, so to speak. Sure. And I think that maybe also going back to the teachings of your father, not to exclude your mother, but because of what you observed in the barbershop, you came to understand how important that transition of honor and grace and dignity took course. And I certainly learned this, and I learned this in the more recent years of going through it with my mom and being around a lot of people between their 80s and 100s. the importance of that transition and how people are advocated for.
Yeah.
And I think that because of the position you're in today, whether within the industry or around the industry or around your community or whatever that, or whomever that is that aligns with you, I see you gracefully serving in ways that, you know, ironically, whether it's one-on-one with other successful men who
Sure.
are aging, or, you know, there's just something about you that I think that will like find a way. No, I don't see you teaching in schools. No, you got you're too, you got to have a fuller, richer, more organic, flowy, like stimulating existence. You know, otherwise, why do it?
Yeah.
Why do it? You don't
Yeah.
need to. You've filled all the boxes that you were like, I'm going to foreshadow. Now it's your job to go make that happen. And you made that happen. And I applaud you, Gerry, because you really are the epitome of what one should strive to be in the realm of this world. And sadly, you know, when I see people who've never been able to buy a property, work their asses off, don't know anything about what goals to strike for and to keep their head down and focus on. And I'm not talking like from a place of perfection. I'm talking from a place of experience. Yeah. That you really are a beacon of light to be of inspiration and mentor in that way. Whether people will listen or not, that's a whole nother can of worms. And then you have to ask yourself, why do I waste my time? I want the tribe that I align with. And this is where I believe you are, you know, what you say. I want to be with the people who I resonate with, who I feel full with, who I feel passion with, have similarities, that I'm not exhausted by. It's not a toxic environment. It's a happy, fulfilling environment. You know, that whatever contribution I make is of value.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I wish that for you.
I think you talk about whether or not people are going to get the message. And yeah, that's heavy. And I think a lot of it depends on the messenger. Some people can hear something from one person and it means nothing. They hear the exact same information from somebody else and it resonates and they're able to apply it to their lives. You know, it's mysterious and it's wonderful. And I think, you know, I'm thinking about another thing that Emil Levine told me that I should share with your audience.
Yeah.
And boy, he was something else. Emil, another part of his wisdom, Emil said, always tell the truth. Always tell the truth. Even if it gets you fired, tell the truth. If you forgot to put the scar on the guy, or you got the bruise on the wrong side of his face or whatever, tell the truth. Even if it costs you the job, even if you get sent out the door because of it. Because in the long run, you're going to develop a reputation that money can't buy. You become known as a person that has integrity and honor and that can tell you the truth. And that's lacking in a lot of people in our industry. They get very caught up in the self-promotion and what they think is the correct thing to say.
Yeah.
And there's danger in that. And I think it's ultimately very stressful if you have to walk around towing that line and not, you know, I'm not saying, I believe that we should be kind also. You know, it's
100%.
One thing to be able to tell somebody the truth about something, but there's another, the element of kindness and consideration shouldn't be left out of that. That's what makes
no,
you know.
No, it never should be left out. It's always about being a humanitarian, being a good citizen unto one another. This is not where you get to dump your shit or be somebody's your punching bag. And honesty should be, you know, part of, you know, good communication.
Yeah.
Should be should be a criteria for what we do. I mean, we are in the realm of communication. We are in the realm of telling story. If we can't do that with one another, which sadly, unfortunately, I have observed many cannot, and yet because of it, leave a lot of people with PSTD or PTSD, whichever the proper correlation is.
True.
And sadly true. Yeah. And I have found that to be more in the more recent decade of my experience than ever before. So, unfortunately, I think that as much talent as we have in our industry, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of insecurity. There's not enough self-development. This is not a criticism. What it means is that if you don't take the time to do those things and fill your tank, you can't come into these worlds and make a contribution without harming others, because you are the thing that's causing the rock in the water effect of not positive results, but negative results. And unfortunately, many people from the top down don't want to see that. They don't want to deal with those problems. They don't know that those problems are existing and festering and having a negative cause and effect on really valuable contributors. And they don't know that they need to stop the bleeding, and they don't fucking care because they don't have the skill set to recognize it from the top down. And that's my observation. Oh, well, you've observed too much, Felicia. And maybe it's because, Gerry, I've actually not chosen the wrong category, but I really, it's because, maybe it would be better to be an executive producer and producer. That's not saying that I'm capable. I'm saying that so then I can stop the bleeding. Maybe.
Yeah. I like the phrase "stop the bleeding." It's perfect.
That's the title. Stop the bleeding.
Stop the bleeding.
Get now. Cut it off. Get it stopped.
It doesn't need to be
back to my medical background.
Felicia, I have to get out of here.
Well, I wanted to just say thank you so much for this time. It's been so amazing and lovely, and more. I hope you enjoyed yourself as much as I enjoyed myself.
Absolutely. That was just fun to do. I've actually never done anything like this, so it was interesting to talk with you and cover some of these topics. It makes me realize just how much there really is to talk. Reflecting back on a career and the life experience that goes with that. We've scratched the surface, but it was really fun. Thank you for asking.
Oh, my pleasure. It's been an honor. And speaking of scratching the surface, maybe we'll do this again. We'll have another coffee clutch.
Sure.
And we'll do some more kibitzing.
Absolutely.
I look forward to it. Much love to you, and thank you so much, Gerry.
Thank you.
Bye for now. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Oh my goodness, was that not entertaining? Gerry Quist, I love you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to sit down with you and have such an authentic, pull back the curtain conversation. And I swear I feel like we just skimmed the surface, but so entertaining, so real, and so timely. The fact that we had that conversation 2 months ago and all the things that got literally revealed within a week or so of that time following between the Academy Awards and Bruce Willis. How crazy is that? Could never have predicted that. And that's what I love about this podcast and these conversations, because we really do get to sit down and realize that 2 hours go by so quickly. We have to split them up into 2 one-part interviews to share, because
we just feel like we're just getting started, and people don't even realize where the 2 hours have gone. And that's what I love about sharing this podcast, is it's all about connection, it's all about conversation, and it's all about really getting to know somebody in a way that maybe they've never had an opportunity to share about themselves or think about for a long time. And for that reason is why I created the Fifi Uncensored podcast, because the spirit is young, and the soul is wise, and there are many vast life stories to share. And, I believe that some people want to put people in boxes. I love all kind of people from all walks of life. So that's why here at the Fifi Uncensored podcast, we talk about everything from soup to nuts, or what I like to say, from cannolis, egg in the holes, and don't forget the s'mores. Join me next week for my conversation with Dean Banowitz, award-winning hairdresser in the film and television industry, who heads up many popular shows like American Idol and So You Think You Can Dance. He is such a hoot. He is so entertaining. His life story is so inspiring and empowering, and a must listen. So join me next week. Join, subscribe, share the Fifi Uncensored podcast, where you will be a part of hearing true, authentic conversations and connections that will inspire you to sit down and do the same in your own world. Love you. Much love. Join me next week. Can't wait to hear your comments. Bye for now.